Formula One is about to make a decision that could expose a massive mistake just weeks into its new era. The 50-50 engine, the biggest technical gamble in years, is already under pressure after only a few races. Drivers are lifting on straights. Cars are losing speed when they should be fastest. And now, the FIA wants urgent rule changes before Miami. But here's the part that changes everything. The CEO of Formula One and multiple teams are rejecting those changes. This is not a normal disagreement. This is a direct clash between the rule makers, the business side, and the teams fighting for performance. Because if the rules change, some teams lose their advantage overnight. If the rules stay, the problem stays on track. And if no one agrees, Formula One heads into Miami with a system already showing cracks. And one race away from turning a technical flaw into a full-blown crisis. At first, nobody inside Formula One called it a failure. Because calling it that, this early, would be too dangerous. This was supposed to be the future. A completely new era. A system designed for precision, efficiency, and perfect balance between electric and combustion power. Everything was calculated. Everything was tested. Everything was approved. So when the first signs appeared, they were ignored. Drivers lifting on straights. Energy running out before the end of a lap. Cars behaving differently from one corner to the next. At first, it sounded normal. A learning phase. A period of adaptation. Something that would disappear once teams understood the system better. But it didn't disappear. It repeated. Again and again and again. Different tracks. Different conditions. Same behavior. And that's when the concern started to grow. Because in Formula One, repetition means something deeper. It means the issue is not external. It's built into the system itself. And internally, that realization came faster than anyone expected. Engineers comparing data. Teams noticing identical patterns. Drivers feeling the same limitations, no matter the setup. And suddenly, what looked like adaptation started to look like a flaw. Because this wasn't about being slower. This was about being restricted. Drivers no longer pushing flat out. Drivers managing energy, calculating every straight, every deployment. And that changes the entire nature of the sport. Because Formula One has always been about instinct. Commitment. Maximum attack. No hesitation. But now, hesitation is part of the system. And when hesitation becomes normal, the sport starts to feel different. Not less advanced. Not less complex. But less pure. And that's exactly what triggered the first real alarm inside the FIA. Because once the problem is not just technical, but visible, felt by drivers, and noticed by fans, it becomes something much harder to ignore. And that's when the conversation changed completely. From, we are learning, to, we need to fix this. But fixing it is where everything starts to break apart. Because the moment everyone agrees there is a problem, the next question becomes impossible to avoid. How do you fix it, without breaking everything else? And that's where Formula One begins to split. Not on track. Behind closed doors. On one side, the FIA. They see a system that is too complex, too unpredictable, and increasingly risky. Drivers managing energy instead of racing. Cars behaving differently in similar conditions. Moments where performance drops, without warning. For them, the solution is direct. Reduce the electric impact. Make the system more stable. Give drivers back control. Bring the cars closer to something natural. Something predictable. But the moment that idea is introduced, it collides with something much bigger. Because on the other side, sits the business of Formula One. And from that perspective, this is not just a technical correction. It's a dangerous signal. Because the 50-50 concept was not just engineering. It was a promise. A modern identity. A vision sold to the world, to manufacturers, to sponsors, to global partners. And changing that now means admitting that the foundation is not working as expected. Too early. Too visibly. So instead of supporting major changes, the response becomes defensive. Protect the concept. Adjust the details. Avoid anything that looks like a step backwards. And that creates tension immediately. Because now, it's no longer about what works best on track. It's about what protects the image off track. But even that is not the full picture. Because there's a third layer, and it might be the most decisive of all. The teams. Because while the FIA is thinking about control, and the CEO is thinking about perception, teams are thinking about something much simpler. Winning. Some teams are struggling with this system. Trying to understand it. Losing performance. For them, change is a lifeline. A reset. A chance to close the gap. But others have already mastered it. They've built their performance around this exact complexity. They've optimized every detail of energy deployment. They've turned limitation into advantage. And for those teams, change is not a solution. It's a threat, because it takes away what they work to build. So they resist, quietly, strategically, support small improvements, reject major shifts, delay decisions, control the pace, because every race without a big change is another race where their advantage remains. And now, everything is locked in place. The FIA pushing for control and stability. The business side protecting the long-term vision. The teams divided between those who need change and those who fear it. And right in the middle of all this is a system that continues to behave the same way every single race, which creates a dangerous situation. Because when a problem is clear, but no one agrees on how to fix it, pressure doesn't disappear. It builds. And in Formula One, when pressure builds without a solution, it always finds a breaking point. The only question now is when and where that breaking point will happen. And this is where everything shifts from tension to consequence. Because up to this point, the problem has been contained, discussed internally, managed carefully, framed as something under control. But the moment it reaches the track again, there is no control anymore. Because Formula One doesn't hide its problems. It exposes them. At 300 kilometers per hour. In front of millions of people. And that's exactly why Miami becomes the turning point. Not because of the layout. Not because of the event. But because of the timing. This is the first race where everyone knows what to look for. Every driver. Every engineer. Every fan watching. Waiting for the same signs. Waiting to see if the cars behave the same way. If drivers lift again. If energy runs out at the worst possible moment. If performance disappears without explanation. And if it does, then the situation changes instantly. Because it stops being a discussion. It becomes proof. And once something becomes visible at that level, it can't be defended anymore. It can't be explained away. It demands action. But here's where the pressure becomes even more dangerous. Because whatever decision was made before Miami will be tested immediately. If the changes were too small, the problem will still be there. Clear. Unavoidable. If the changes were too aggressive, the consequences will show just as quickly. Performance gaps shifting. Teams losing advantage. The balance of the grid changing overnight. And if no changes were made, then everything that was discussed behind closed doors becomes public failure. Because everyone will see it. The same behavior. The same limitations. The same system, doing exactly what it was doing before. And that's when the real damage begins. Not technical. Reputational. Because Formula One is built on the idea of perfection. Precision. Control. The belief that every detail is understood, managed, optimized. But when something behaves unpredictably, that belief starts to crack. And once it cracks, trust becomes the real issue. Drivers start questioning the system. Teams start questioning the direction. Fans start questioning the product. And when all three happen at the same time, that's no longer a technical problem. That's a crisis. Because at that point, it's not about fixing a regulation. It's about restoring confidence. And that is much harder to do. Which brings everything to one final moment. Not the start of the race. Not even the first lap. But the moment something unexpected happens. A sudden loss of speed. A strange lift on a straight. A situation that shouldn't exist, but does. And in that moment, everyone watching will understand the same thing. Whether Formula One fixed the problem, or simply delayed it. Because the track always reveals the truth. And in Miami, that truth won't stay hidden anymore. And this is where the story reaches the point Formula One fears the most. Not the mistake. Not the conflict. But the moment it becomes undeniable. Because everything up to now can still be managed. Explained. Framed as part of a process. But once reality confirms the problem in front of everyone, there is no control left. Only consequences. Because if Miami exposes the same behavior again, then the conclusion becomes impossible to avoid. The 50-50 system didn't just need adjustment. It was fundamentally misjudged. And that is a completely different level of problem. Because misjudging something this big, this central to the identity of the sport, doesn't just affect performance. It affects credibility. It affects trust in every decision that comes after. And that's why what happens next is even more important than the race itself. Because once that realization hits, Formula One has only two options. Admit it and react. Or delay it and protect the image. If they admit it, they can fix the problem properly. Reshape the system. Bring the cars back to something drivers can fully trust. Something that feels natural again. But that comes with a cost. Because admitting it means saying one thing very clearly. The biggest regulation change in years did not work as expected. And that message echoes far beyond the paddock, into contracts, into partnerships, into every manufacturer that committed to this vision. But if they choose the other path, if they protect the concept, if they keep applying small fixes, trying to hold everything together without addressing the core, then the problem doesn't disappear. It evolves. It becomes part of the sport, normalized, accepted. And that is where the real danger begins. Because once a flaw becomes normal, it stops being fixed. It becomes permanent. And changing it later becomes almost impossible without breaking everything around it. So this is no longer about Miami. It's not even about the season. It's about direction. Because right now, Formula One is standing at a crossroads. One path leads to correction. Difficult. Expensive. But real. The other leads to preservation. Controlled. Careful. But risky. And the decision between those two paths will define far more than just a race weekend. It will define what this era of Formula One becomes. Because every era in this sport is remembered for something. Dominance. Innovation. Controversy. And this one, right now, is deciding what it wants to be remembered for. A bold revolution that adapted in time. Or a system that was protected too long, until it became its own limitation. And the answer to that question will not come from a statement. It will not come from a meeting. It will come from what happens next. On track. Where nothing can be hidden. Where every weakness is exposed. And where Formula One will finally reveal if it is still in control of its future, or already reacting to a problem it created, but can no longer fully contain.